Welcome to Funnel Reboot, the podcast that shares ideas on how to upgrade your lead generation. Here is your host, Glenn Schmeltzley.
Hey, Glenn here. Welcome to Funnel Reboot. Today's topic, getting marketing optimization projects funded. First, let me remind you, I really want to hear about what you think of the show, and I would love you to send me feedback on any social media platform at Funnel Reboot or via our website where you can phone in listener feedback or you can leave a contact form message. To today's topic. When you want to improve some part of your marketing, you quickly start thinking about how you're going to get your boss to agree to it. It's not the easiest thing, but it is possible. And I know this because our guest today has done it many times. In his own words, he is a true marketing nerd who works in the marketing team at CallSource. I met him at a national marketing event where he gave a presentation about justifying the money needed for marketing projects. This is one of his passions, along with paid search, marketing analytics, and in particular, no surprise, using data to show ROI. When he's not working, he likes wrestling with his 4 kids, cooking, and he enjoys everything to do with Batman. He is also the host of Close the Loop, which is a podcast designed specifically for small and medium businesses who are trying to improve their marketing. Please help me in welcoming Kevin Dieny. I'm really glad to welcome Kevin Dieny. Welcome, Kevin.
Thanks for having me, Glenn.
Thank you. So, Kevin, I know you to be a guy who has a good amount of scientific precision to him, but I also know you to be a guy who's got a good business head too, and you're also pretty good for having fun with. So, but it's this mixture of having a scientific method as well as talking business that I've got you here today. And we're going to talk a bit about optimizing a company's funnel, optimizing the way that they acquire their customers, usually within a framework where there's a mixture of paid advertising as well as some other channels like organic. And you know very well how this works. Can you tell me when someone's really got these optimizations working, what criteria they're using to try and decide how they would optimize, and what ways they describe or get payoff for these?
Yeah. So the optimization, getting the dream goal for optimization is being able to fluidly test the things that are the most priority for the business, to be able to get results that are the most meaningful for the business, to be able to share the things that your higher ups, your leadership, that they're interested in, that all align all the way down through the organization toward toward a goal. The goal of an organization may be, well, we want more customers. That's pretty much like the general what every
Sure.
business says it wants. But there's also goals like, you know what, we'd really like to sell this product, or we'd really like to push this product into this specific segment or group. We'd like to launch a brand new product. We'd like to, there's a lot there that the goal of an organization may have. And they're thinking, okay, how is marketing going to help me do this? And marketing is pretty much the penultimate goal for marketing is always to take what processes it has at scale and generate value that other departments, other teams may suffer with, may be hard for them to get to. So the dream optimizational world is, to me, all about like priorities and alignment there. So when you're testing the right things, when you're optimizing the right things, it doesn't have to necessarily result in reaching the goal for the company, but at least you're going to learn something, or it's going to give you the direction you need to move forward. So it's all about priorities.
Yeah, and these priorities are something that we, sometimes, well, if we're doing it properly, at the beginning of, let's say, a period, a month or a quarter, we're saying we will do these things, and then at the end, you are saying, what we accomplished from them. But I've heard you talk at various times in a way that there's actually some backing to the we will try these things. almost to the point where it sounds like you are predicting, um, if we make this kind of investment in this part of our acquisition, you know, path, that we foresee that the company will make $330,000 more dollars, or
Mhm.
that our return on ad spend will be 1.5x what it was in the last period, or that we're going to increase the conversion rate on a particular kind of campaign. Um, that's pretty lofty. Tell me, does every marketing department just start off being able to do this kind of predictive stuff, or is there some groundwork? Is there foundational stuff that has to be there before you can get here?
Yeah, so if you're like walking into a brand new marketing department anywhere, I think the first thing you're doing is like, okay, what resources does this team have? What things are going on here that are going to help this team move forward? And then you're also looking at, okay, what has worked for this team before? What things are working today? What things when you first walk in, it's not like I don't know any marketing teams that have like, oh yeah, here's the book on everything that's happened here. It's more like, well, this is what we're doing today. So
Yeah,
here's it may not be able to explain exactly why some of that stuff is happening today,
right.
but yeah, behind the optimization, like behind a lot of this goes back to like the concept of the maturity model. So when you get in there and you're like, okay, what is going on in this organization? What could we do to get it to these goals? You could only forecast if you have a process running, and that process is running and it has been running for long enough that you could make the prediction. So in the beginning, I like to call it cannonballing, because instead of like predictable shooting and stuff, you're basically like, look, I just got to hit the target. So I'm just going to fire away with the biggest, most giant thing I can to hit the target. And then after that, I'm going to get more precise, get more targeted, get more specific, more personalized, things like that. So initially, it's like, got to figure out what works at all. And then when you figure that out, you kind of refine it. The thing is, there's a detrimental balance toward refining and process and optimization. Because yes, it's going to make something work better, but it's also going to lock you in, meaning you're going to get better along whatever it's trying to achieve. Like you might be like, look, I just want more of these type of leads, and over time you're going to optimize your campaign and it's going to get better and better and better at that. But it's also going to get worse and worse and worse at hitting things generally, because you're turning right your shot from a cannonball down to like a laser. So being laser targeted is where you get closer and closer to, okay, I'm going to spend $1 and then I'm going to get $10, $20 out of it. And that's what every financial leader, every CEO, every leadership group I've ever come across, they want to be able to say, I want to confidently say, I'm going to give you $1. And I want you to tell me how much I'm going to get out of that, because every business decision they make is not in silo. It's not like isolated, like, okay, it's just you I'm giving $1 to. They're thinking, okay, well, if I expand into this other area, I can make more products. If I go over here, I can increase the retention. If I cut back here, I can save money and put it in the bank for more increased capital. I could launch a new offshot company. The business leader's decision is so complex that if you can really simplify it to the point, it really feel like you can only really do that when you're lasering in the marketing side, to say, okay, if I spend this money, I've been running this process for weeks, months, years,
Yes.
whatever. I can confidently tell you my cost per lead, my cost per deal, my retention. You can get to these very specific things where it's like, okay, if you give me the dollar here, here's really what you might be able to expect I'm probably going to get. Obviously, no one's got a crystal ball,
Right.
but that's the kind of stuff they need to make the decision.
Yeah. And you have to be uh, including them in what you're doing, and you have to be attuned to what they are looking for. Because without that communication, yeah, you're off in, left field. And I think that's where maybe that narrowing, while it can sound a little bit uncomfortable, but as long as you are aligned with what the senior management team wants, they may say to you, no, we're absolutely in, with our financial structure and with everything else we're doing right now, we do want you to double down, and we want these particular metrics that lead to acquiring a new customer to be optimized. But I'm going to come back to one thing you said. You talked about silo, and any marketer who's done this for a while knows that the data with which they are going to try and make these numbers along this pathway get better, that data is not sitting all in one convenient system. So
Never.
tell me a little bit about what kind of maturity has to happen with our data before we can, talk, kind of walk with some, swag and say brashly to our senior management team, yeah, I can optimize this.
Yeah, so I think the best way to illustrate this is with story. So this is what I went through to get to the walking tall, but not really walking however I want on gilded roads. So essentially for us, the yellow brick road, right? It started with we have discrete, meaning siloed data. Data's
Yeah.
everywhere. Data's in
Yeah.
Google Ads, data's in Google Analytics, data's in our CRM, data's in our accounting tool, data's over here.
Yeah.
Uh, okay, so how do I know if something over here is the same thing over there? We don't know. It's impossible. So the very first things actually wasn't like pulling all the data into a sort of a centralized hub. The
Okay.
very first thing was, in a sense, simulating what if we had the information. Let's simulate if we had the information first. What information would we actually use? What information does our manager, boss, leader actually want to see? Because when we thought of it, we're like, oh yeah, they're going to want to see like SEO rankings. They're going to want to see cost per click, click-through rates, landing page bounce hits. They're in reality, we asked them, they're like, I just want to see dollars.
Yeah.
So we're
Right. But
like,
you would have built this
yeah.
enormous thing that they would have only
Uh,
used a few, a small subset.
yeah, so we thought, okay, well, the end result, the thing where we're going to probably get money for all this is going to be whether we can prove things are reacting to dollars. That's difficult to do, but as like a team. So I went to someone in charge of our website, someone in charge of our articles, SEO, someone in charge of each of these, and was like, what data do you need? And they were kind of like, well, in Silo, I have everything I need in each of these platforms, but
Yeah.
I can't relate it to dollars.
Right.
So we came out of it with, okay, there's a lot of the metrics the specialists, let's call them, the marketing specialists, marketing people are using to make their decisions. And some of them are less siloed than we thought. And the big things that we need to know, the most important stuff to get money for any kind of data centralization, data organizational tools, data unsiloing project, was going to be relating everything to money, to dollars, to revenue that we're generating, to things like that. So we were like, okay. And we also saw that it wasn't every metric under the sun. Like you can go look up what are the top KPIs, metrics,
Yep.
marketing teams and businesses are measured by. Like you kind of, like you had mentioned before, you really need alignment both in your team with leadership, and there's the possibility of wondering what other teams are doing. Because we modeled everything in Excel and Google Sheets. So we
Okay.
didn't do it in any mega warehouse yet.
Yep.
We pulled data together. We started adding IDs to things, keys. We started doing things that created this represented this same record or object or field or table or whatever it was in a different system. So for instance, an example is like, okay, John Smith filled out this form. Here's John Smith who bought this deal, and here's John Smith in accounting and how much they're paid each month.
Yep.
Right. We have found ways to relate that, but pulled it all out in Excel, and it was brutal. And just sort of we call it the prototype, right? So that's what we put together, a prototype of what it would all look like. And when we had it all done and we showed it off, people were like, whoa, we've never even seen this before.
Yeah.
And then they asked questions, which when we asked them for weeks and months ahead of time, what questions would you ask? They started to ask questions about the data they had never thought they would ask.
Yes.
So then we came back, we're like, okay, now we need to change our data model, because now that they've seen the data,
Right.
I see they're asking other and more complex questions. So it moves along just like the maturity curve.
So you're telling me when they start to ask those new questions, we shouldn't be turning to them and shutting them down and saying, no. This is all I wanted to build. What you're saying is, even though it may, hurt us inside a little, that we have to lean in and get those questions and then go back and say, looks like we're going to need more data,
Yeah, like one
or
thing we
we're going
showed
to
them
have
is
to
like
rearrange it.
we showed them like here's stuff marketing has generated, and then they were like, well, what about the stuff marketing didn't generate? We were like, we would never think to look there because we were only trying to get the stuff we cared about. And then it was like, okay, well, let's look at the other stuff. And then as we unraveled that, we were like, we started presenting information and data, and then they started reacting like, whoa, this is a big problem. And we were like, yeah, we've seen this, we felt this, everyone has said this, but now that you see the data, you believe
Yeah,
it.
it's
So
quantified. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
But at the same time, there's other things where there's really great meetings where we've gone in and showed off information and data, and we've heard flat out right at the beginning, I don't believe this. There's absolutely no way this is true.
wow,
Double, triple check this, because if this is true,
yeah,
we're fundamentally, there's a problem. And so we would have to go through, and what we discovered by going through all this double, triple times, asking everyone that we have everything exactly right, is that some systems, some things along the way were just incomplete, and assumptions we had made were off. I've had some of these where we've have ended and fundamentally things radically had to change,
yeah,
and it resulted in some unpleasantness. But
yeah. Yeah,
yeah, I mean,
including perhaps having to swap out and swap in a tool that captures, that particular data set. We must be prepared. We can't we can't close off the possibility that there may be some new expense that we have to go to management for, right? Because we found that a particular piece of this just is inadequate.
yeah, usually the easy answer that I fall into is oftentimes like there's a tool for this. And a lot of times when there is, it's like, oh goodness, it's going to save us, I don't know, time or effort. But there's two other dimensional things. There's two other questions that are always holding that back for us. And it's something that has, I would say, evolved and matured us, how
Okay.
marketing responds to data. And the first one is we could absolutely have data that beyond a doubt showcases how wonderful, amazing a test performed, and that we should make a change. And then when we do that, we're going to see some uplift, something positive out of it, and we don't go forward with it. And it can blow my mind sometimes, but the reasons are, right, the reasons that we may not get a tool, the reasons we may not get more money or more budget or something,
Yep.
uh, it kind of falls into these two categories. And one of them is like process inflexibility.
Yes.
So process inflexibility is a business has something working for them and that they've done for a long time, and it's worked and it's gotten them where they are today.
Right.
And if they try to change that now, that's huge. And it's the cost to change is insane at that point.
Yes.
Now, the second one
But
is,
and
or go ahead.
hate to interrupt you for a second, but I think this is really important for marketers to understand, because we want to think, oh well, within our world this is good, but this is, I guess an economist would call this an externality, right?
Mhm.
I think of like how single-use plastic, right? So we, buy stuff, we bring it home from the store, we consume the thing that is inside the single plastic, and then the single plastic goes in the recycling bin, and out of our minds it goes.
Yes.
But it's not gone. And this is one of those process inflexibility pieces, I think, where we've just hit, oh wait a minute, the world runs on single-use plastic, and very many people do not want it to change, because of what it implies would have to change to bring it out of the system.
Yes.
Right. So yeah, I don't know if that's a fair comparison, but
No,
but
it is. Yeah.
it's something that, like for us, it's, you discard it. It's not even, it has nothing to do with us, but somebody else in the organization, it's at the very core of how their entire process works.
Yeah. I mean, we could do the research, we could do the legwork and be like, look, we know the cost of the change. Like it has a quantifiable cost. So why is it still not happening? And that's where the second piece comes in. And that is what I call leadership capital. So that is where, okay, we could do this. It makes
Yep.
sense, dollars and cents.
Yep.
But you're asking me to tell people to change their behavior, like to change processes that are so ingrained. It could be that the entire sales, the entire marketing team, some entire teams have operated this way for a long time, and there's already so much they're up against. How am I going to ask them to do 10 more things to change everything they've done? Like the people may not be possible, and people you can fire and hire. I mean, as
Yep.
cold as that sounds, you can do
Yep.
that.
Yep.
But at the same time, process stuff like how we've built our stuff, how we've created ourselves, the values we are now, the beliefs we have,
Yes.
essentially the culture, it clashes up against leadership capital. The CEO may be like, it's my job to make sure that this runs right, but I don't know if I can walk into a meeting and be like, we're a shoe company, but now we're going to be a tire company. You know
Right.
what I'm saying? Like
Yeah.
it
That
can be, it can
drastic.
feel that drastic
Yeah.
of single use plastics, but now we're changing something so ingrained. It may take a long time. It may be something where they're like, it's just not worth it, even though there's benefit on the other end. And
Sure.
that's something as a marketing, especially when you're dealing with data, the data can feel so honest and so true, and feel like, okay, everyone is on the same page now because we're talking about something that's so, it's just is what it is. It's not filled with
Yes.
emotion. It's not tied to things like that. But there are reasons why the interpretation
Yep.
of that information and how it actually turns into a decision is kind of more core to where data really needs to lie. More marketing needs to lie in decision making,
Yeah.
less in just deriving an insight. And that takes quite a bit of business knowledge, of internal company knowledge, to work out how this all connects to a decision and what that may mean.
Yeah. And I think a little bit of this is a glass half empty, glass half full thing. If you if you're leaning into the kind of purist side, you might say to yourself, well, we've done the analysis. I'm unhappy that we can't move forward with this type of optimization test or change to our data model. I choose to look at it with all right, there's a couple of things we just had to park, but look at the white space that has been created with not going down into those areas. What are some other things that are literally like stones at our feet that we could just pick up, and we can move on these things, and they are possible to do, and they don't seem to have the same amount of there aren't as many obstructions to doing them, and they're that, so you can kind of make it the art of the possible.
Yeah, I think a lot of what you're describing there is like the value of leadership in both sides, and
Yeah.
how they're led. Because a leader of data purists or data analysts generally, right, of anyone in marketing, whoever it is, they may be really on the side of over their department. They want to go to bat for their team, but at the same time, they're sort of responsible in making sure that things are aligned.
Yeah.
When you go down into optimization, into orchestration of data, you're sort of building a bridge with the other side kind of in view. So, but
Yeah, a
the longer,
pragmatic side.
yeah, you're building it, and the longer you build it, the more kind of sunk costs you have in having built that bridge. So
Yes.
it makes the analyst, makes the team really upset, data purists upset, to be like, well, man, like you're not using any of the data we provided. You're not, doing anything with it. You're not able to make any decisions from it. And we built this bridge. We put a lot of energy and resources into this. It's sort of upsetting when it doesn't lead to anything. And now we're going to build a bridge the other direction. It's
Yeah.
that I understand, but leadership, and the leadership of that has to sort of make sure that everyone I'd say it goes top down, everyone top to bottom is pretty well aligned with the goals and what's going on and what needs to be achieved by the company's strategic aims, down to the departments, down to other teams. It helps just to have a general idea what the strategy is for the company right now. And that can tell you, okay, even if I'm building this bridge and it may not get used, it is part of the strategy in some sense. It's not like it is a sunk, wasted cost. It's all part of what every team is responsible to do to help the company overall to achieve, its strategy. And everyone's in the same team. It's not like sales and marketing
No,
and
it
data
rolls up
analysts
all to
fighting
one
over it.
team. Nope, you're exactly
Yes.
right. You're exactly right. And if we kind of think of it as an organism, yeah, we want all of it, its overall health to be fine. Having, like the strongest muscle in your pinky finger doesn't really help overall, right?
I
So,
love that example. Yeah.
um, so this gets us into like, yeah, we've got these optimization tests that we can run, but we want to be selective about them. And
Mhm.
so now we start to, you know, move through a maturity curve of, maybe we start off with some guesses, or maybe the one I've often heard is we start at the top of the funnel and at the first place where we notice, uh, uh, assuming there's a large amount of traffic coming into the top of our funnel, we notice a significant pinch point, right? Where there's a very low rate of throughput from that step to the step below. So, often people start with things like that. Um, I know you've talked in the past about maybe going beyond that. What would you say is kind of a next level of selecting areas to optimize, not just that, well, let's, see if we can move more numbers, just generic, everybody's the same, and just in aggregate terms, just get a bigger number at that bottom level.
Yeah. So project selection is a huge thing. And there's a couple aspects to it that I think are really important. The first one is that all projects will succeed through feedback, not through getting it right not through getting it right at the beginning.
Hmm.
So by that I mean you've selected you may, like you said, projects come out of everywhere.
Yep.
They come out of the top, the middle, the bottom of a funnel. They come out of talking to other people. They come out of listening to a sales call, listening to a sales conversation. They come from looking at, okay, why are people canceling? You
I
know,
was going to say, being a visitor on your own website.
yeah.
Right.
The the questions come, but when another aspect of project selection to me is how close to revenue it is. So I actually tend to want to start with projects closer to the bottom of the funnel first and work my way backwards up if I've eliminated all the bottom, the middle, and the top tests. Now, obviously, as many tests as you can run in your organization and your team, the better. Uh, if you, especially when when there's high volume results at the bottom of the funnel, I find it really hard to find a good test a lot of times because
Yeah.
it may not be enough people there, may not be enough
Right.
people to test. I can come up with great projects there, but I can quickly eliminate them because there's not enough volume, and I
Or
need a
it's or you
significance.
would wait an untenably long period of time.
Correct. Yeah. Or I either have too much time or not enough data or something like that. There's something there. It could also be it's hard because the test would be slightly unstructured. There's things about it I would quickly eliminate. So sometimes you end up moving up until there is a point. Sometimes it is the top of the funnel. It's the only place you can test things, and it is what it is. So once you've got your tests and you've figured that out, you move through it, right? Like, okay, if I run this test and I determine something is going to be better or worse, what impact is it going to have? The the tests evolve like for a business to me when the feedback from the test itself is going to be richer, stronger, better. So here's an example of
Okay.
one where
Okay.
the feedback is terrible, but the test could have huge results.
Go ahead.
And that is when you make the sometimes fatal mistake of asking sales to take in an extra data point in their conversations. Or when
Yeah.
you ask them, hey, I see that there's deals happening. They're moving through your pipeline, and the
Yep.
pipeline can have many multiple stages. Many businesses work and behave very differently. There's sometimes longer, sometimes shorter spans. But you're like, you know what? If I had this collected point from you, then I would understand how to help you better. Well, what has happened, and sometimes, it makes total sense, right? You don't end up getting that data as often as you'd like, or it's unclear, or it's not put in with a lot of clarity,
Reliably.
right?
Yeah.
Reliably. It's not well understood. There's problems that break down there. So you can even look at it like, I'd love to run more tests in this area, but if I'm not going to get any good feedback from it, then it's probably not something a good test, even if the results could drastically and positively for the better,
Ugh.
improve something. So you have to look at it like,
Okay.
okay, yeah, the
But
quality of
but
this test
I
is all.
guess so the it sounds awful, but is it just that you're saving yourself the grief of imagining that this is going to, go very well, and then going through it only to realize at the end it was doomed?
Yeah, you are avoiding that. There,
Okay.
as at an agency, right? Here's a different way of looking at this. Should I run this test?
Right.
Yes, a huge potential for this client to gain benefit out of this test, out of a series of tests, of testing it all. Should I test with this client's data? And the client says, yes, I love that. But let's say the first time you do that, you present your results to them and they say, that's great, but we don't really like it. We don't really want that. And you're like, okay, well, why? And you try to understand. And then over time, now I'm not saying this happens just one experience. You have
Yep.
multiple experiences where you realize they say they want testing, but they don't take any of the feedback we provide. So
Yeah.
nothing's really ever implemented. I look at that also like, I maybe they're just, yeah, we want to test and do our due diligence. Yeah, we want to offer them and do the best we possibly can. But sometimes it's like, maybe we'll just not tell them we're doing the testing. Maybe we'll just not do the testing and present the results to them. Maybe we'll just work. I mean, maybe it's better. And you have to be careful with that when I say
Right.
that.
So this could be low
But
level versus high level. Right. Okay. I
yeah,
understand. Or maybe we've just optimized an orphan page on the website that is only getting traffic from this one channel. And it's a channel that we have the mandate to run for them. So all they want to know is we made things better. We haven't, upended their entire website and gotten every visitor, you know, in a lather over some change.
yeah, that's a really good way to put it. Because like as the client on the client side, you may think, well, wow, my agency is doing all this testing, but I really just don't care. I just really care about how much I'm paying and making sure I'm getting my results. So if
Yeah.
that's the case, it's like you kind of have to. The audience optimization is important. It's especially important when you have to consider the audience who's going to receive the feedback. If it's you, right? You're controlling your own, it's really like a closed system.
Yeah.
It's data feedback for you, and then you're just going to do your job better. That's just a question of, okay, well, is it worth the time to do my own optimization? But at the same time, if there's another audience involved, if there's a client involved, an external, internal, some other team. So in summary, when you're thinking of what project, what optimizations, everything like that, anything tied to, well, I'd like to make something better. I'd like to improve what we're doing. I'd like to take a process we have and make it more laser focused, make it better. I think you really have to consider who the audience is. And that audience is who's going to get the feedback, who is going to do something with that information, who's going to make the decision, who's going to take action on this. The receptibility of that audience, of that person or group or whoever it is, to the information you provide is something that you should consider, because you really
Yeah.
want your efforts and your stuff to go as far as they can. And it takes it's a little delicate, it's a little balanced. Sometimes it's a leadership responsibility
Yes.
to perform, but managing up is important too. And by that I mean you have to
Yeah.
kind of ask the questions as someone of your leadership to make sure that things are going in the right direction.
Yeah. And in every, let's say, a B2B scenario, every time you have marketing and sales at this, and I'm reading loud and clear what you're saying about how you have to consider there's a whole other group that, you may be treading on. And you got to be cognizant politically of what you're trying to ask for. Maybe you should chalk up some wins and establish, a track record within, let's say, your own group, because you could, that's containable. But yeah, consider the feedback and the other party that will have to change if the implications of your data are right. I want to flip a confession to make in the previous question where I was asking about, are we just bringing more numbers down into the next tier of our funnel. I was thinking of a case where we're imagining that we have just swappable people in there that you know it you might think that this it doesn't matter who's coming through, and that can work. that can work in let's say, a low value, commodity based type sale. But most of the people that we're talking to today are in a highly considered purchase, and one where the average transaction value varies greatly. Enterprise, mid market, let's say your chosen vertical versus someone on an edge case or a new market where what you have is unproven. So uh, the trick that I was saying there is, I know that you're not a fan of companies sticking with this idea that it's one size fits all and we're just shoving product.
Yes, I'm very much against product driven marketing. And by that, it's like, I'm going to tell them what to buy, what they
Yeah.
should like, why they should like things, and they should just agree with me.
Yeah.
Um,
And I only care on surpassing the bar that says my price point is below the value that that I'm going to try and build in their heads.
Yeah, and it sometimes can be involving customer research, right? You can actually get to these product driven decision making styles with customer research. You could be like, look, in our survey, most of them said they liked this. Most customers said they wanted this. Most customers said they wouldn't use this new thing we're making because they don't know what it is. They don't understand it. We tried to explain it to them, and they weren't interested in it. Um,
Yeah.
it, it can it's sort of an echo chamber where customers know what exists, they know what is out there, they
Yes.
are comfortable with certain things, they're not comfortable with change either. A lot of times companies that innovate, that do new and different things, they're like, what the heck is it? Like, I'm sure that iPhones, smart watches, at some point people were like, why do you need all this? Why do you want to carry around all this? Why do you want this? And then what do you know, a little while later, some innovative change came along and blew everything out, and people changed their minds and saw some valued application to it. So it's very difficult to approach an innovative thing and in marketing and get there only through product. But at the same time, right, you have to balance. Okay, yes, I want to be customer centric, meaning I want to derive and give value to consumers and customers, but they don't always know what's best for themselves. So there is
Yeah.
some balance of being able to test something without throwing all your eggs in one basket.
Yeah. Something you've also helped me appreciate is it's not limited to the type of thing that I'm selling. It can even be in the way I'm selling it. I think it's Brian Halligan from HubSpot who once said, you know, in digital, our product isn't just what we sell, but the way in which the customer is going to find out and buy and onboard and get value out of the product. That's actually part of the product too. And it's a
Yeah.
huge part of the product. In fact, if you had two products side by side, he would argue the one that has that better process is actually going to sell more.
Yeah. So that's really wise. And it's very, the reason I said, like, you don't want to put all your eggs in one basket, right? Is because when you're testing something, you don't want to be in the position where you're like, I could only test this thing. I could only, like, you've invested all the resources you possibly had into testing. Let's say you're testing video, right?
Yep.
Video is costly to produce, costly to make.
Yep.
So if you're like, I'm going to test 5 videos, okay, 5 videos is very expensive. So if you blow all your budget testing something only to discover that, you could discover one of the videos is better than the other, fine. But I think it's better if you test something that's a little lighter, meaning you could test something where if it fails, fine, you move on. Like, you haven't
Yep.
invested a ton. Maybe instead of a 10-minute video, you just test the beginning of like the 5. And maybe
Yep.
30 seconds is easier, less costly than making 10 minutes. I think the lighter an optimization or test is, the better, like from HubSpot's quote, the better you can make a product that has the process. But the more process you stack on, the problem is the more constrained you are to changing and switching it. So if you just do the beginning, or just maybe just the first part of the process, when you test something, it
Yes.
affords you the ability to build from that point, right? On test, on test, on test, on test. So you kind of, I look at it like, okay, what is the upfront requirements of this test? Does it have a heavy cost? And even though the rewards and stuff are great, if it is, I'd really look at it like, how many tests, if this strips me of making lots of tests because I only can run one, mm, maybe less good, because all these projects have to be weighed. But there's also this feeling that I have of, man, if you get it right the first time, that's called like the unicorn in marketing.
Yeah.
You should expect that you're going to run a test, you're going to learn something, but where you are 5 tests down the way, 5 tests later with this thing, may not exactly be where you thought you would be at the first test. Does that make
Hmm.
sense? It can
It
change.
definitely it brings chess to mind. You got to think a couple moves ahead,
Yeah.
right? Um, One thing though, again, glass half full, Glenn, is you may be able to spot segments in your customers. And if you have enough data, you could just try this on a few of them. And I think this is one thing that you've helped open me to, is kind of the antidote of thinking in that product based way, is to think about how you might be able to lift customer lifetime value. And to test it, you don't have to think about, like, Atlas lifting the earth, doing it all at once. You might just say, I think we're glumping high value customer lifetime folks here with low value. What if we just test it on the higher one and see if we get a lift? Maybe there's additional headroom there that if we made an upsell, a cross sell, or thought of how we do our retention with them, maybe we can find more gas in the tank there. And we haven't, closed off or dead ended ourselves with any of the testing with the other segments.
Yeah, that's exactly what I prefer. I love high receptible feedback. I love quick, fast, easy, closest to revenue feedback optimizations. I prefer optimizations that I can easily explain to leadership. I
Yep.
like simple, meaning like kind of simple, but just dead easy to explain. I also like where I love it when other teams, when I have backing or support from other teams. So basically, okay, if I do this in marketing, I'm going to measure how it works, how it impacts another team. Well, that's
Yep.
great for me, but if the other team's unaware of it, I mean, we can keep it blind until after, but we may just tell their manager and have them figure it out. But most of the time, I like it where there's support and it's like, hey, we think that if we do this thing, we make this change, we're going to have this impact. We've been looking at this historically, right? That's the first part of the maturity curve. Then we're forecasting, that's, moving up the maturity curve. And we think that this is what we'll expect from this. And orchestration is where we hit the last level. And that's, okay, we're going to make this one change here. And we believe that because of what the data shows, this is going to have this impact. We explain it to the other team. The other team goes, this is fantastic. I get this. This makes sense to me. I can't, if they see any problem with it, they may tell us, okay, if you make this change, I'm going to have to do this. But
Yeah.
generally, it's best if it's like, look, you're going to make this change and I'm not going to have to do anything. And the benefit's going to reap for me and for you. I'm on board. So if that, all those things is what makes like a project optimization, especially when we're using data to make decisions.
Yes.
That's where it really comes together for me.
I can't help but notice the pun in the word you've used, because an orchestra is exactly the picture that comes to my mind when you describe how there could be a couple of different departments. And let's imagine that there's a meeting of senior management and they can't help but notice that supports, one of their KPIs is doing way better. And that we're able to tie back to the fact that they were working, I'm sorry, I have to do this, it's a dad joke, in concert with the marketing guys, and that it was the blending of, the different tests tied together with the understanding that the outcome, right? Marketing moved the lever, but what actually, pushed in in a good direction from that movement was felt way over in another department on one of their big board numbers.
Yeah. How
And
often
yeah, well,
that
I mean, it's kind of in an ideal world, but
right.
I guess the point I really want to hammer home, coming back full circle, is when marketing wants to then ask for the next optimization test and request some investment, time, dollars, talent to be able to do it, I can imagine what the senior management team's reaction is versus them hearing for the very first time, well, let's take a flyer on, idea X.
Yeah. Communicating I'm a fan of like communicating projects, learnings, progress fairly often. I know that can feel for some, I have colleagues in other areas and different we walk different areas of marketing. Having a lot of meetings with like a superior or with your leadership it can feel a little micromanaging because they're going to have feedback. They're going to say, yeah, that sounds good. Yeah, I'm not really interested in that so much. And sometimes your dreams of optimizing and making something come true are shot. But I really appreciate that because it keeps you aligned, keeps you chugging. Like as a leader, I favor it because that way I could take it to my subordinates. But ultimately, yeah, if it's a maturity point of leadership to even have the discussion, right? What are you testing? What are you learning? That's not common. That's not everywhere. Most of the time
Yeah,
it's how are we performing? How can we do better? And why aren't we just getting it right? I think a lot of times in marketing, you're not going to get anything right until you test and improve and test and explore and fail and fail and fail. And that just comes from repeated feedback loop, right? Learning, failing, applying, changing. That the boss doesn't want to necessarily hear, okay, you tested 50 things, let me go through each 50 thing. I don't think that's what they want to
no,
expect. I think in general, it's like, look, I'm trying to move the needle in this area. This is where I'm dedicating my resources. Here's some ideas I have and how I'm going to do that and accomplish that. And they may say, okay, that sounds good. Update me in 6 weeks, 4 weeks, or next
right,
quarter, whatever it is. So your feedback with your leadership interval, right, may line up with your testing and optimization just so that you can come back with some updates and you can
right,
communicate that.
right. And yet, if we take that extra time and get them there, speaking from experience, the leadership, I think they move out of the place where they're bristling at assembling for their regular meeting, and the analytics are going to be brought up, and it's going to be uh, some awkward pauses where somebody is defensively explaining what happened, because I think we've
Yes.
all been in those meetings, to meetings where you're saying we understand the relationships, and we understand if we do this thing, why it's going to influence this other thing, and like the level of the conversation just gets that much higher. It empowers everybody from the decision maker to the person who's analyzing, because they all feel like they can, like, run a little simulation, right? Like they can start to say, well, what if, um, and it's not just a description of historical information. It's actually a, like I was saying earlier about an organism, this is understanding how we might improve overall health by getting right into what the particulars are of how we want to do it. And we're not just shaking our fists on, oh, everything's got to be better. No, it's, we got some insights here. How do we use them?
Yes. Yeah. There's it's a cultural thing, I think, at the end
Right.
of the maturity line where you cross. Yeah, there's orchestration there. What are we going to do with the information we have? But culturally, in a business, it's how do we respond to the insights we get? What do we what Yeah,
Hmm.
or we want to orchestrate, we want to get to that point where we can be like, information from marketing is going to influence what we're going to do in sales, or it's going to influence product, or it's going to influence all of it, or whatever. But that is a place very few businesses are. Most businesses are at that point where they're going to just ask what happened, which is the very, very first stage. Just tell me what happened yesterday, what happened last month. That's all I care about. What happened? because I'm going to, in my head, disseminate all that information and then kind of use that to figure out a general forecast, right? But they're skipping over like the why is this happening? And that skipping over that is very common. You go, okay, what happened? Okay, well, whatever happened, I'm just going to assume it's what's going to happen forever. So I'll just make a few changes here or there and rock and roll. But why exactly something happened is so hard to get to. And when you have that kind of cleaned up, when you're having those discussions and someone at the table goes, ooh, I have an idea now. I can see why. I know why this happened. You can have people who are giving advice to marketers who have never been a marketer, because they just like, wow, this data just makes sense to me.
Yes.
And we should do this.
Yes.
And then it's like, yeah, that's exactly what a conclusion I arrived at.
And for your culture, that's immeasurably helpful to involve those people and, just let them intuit once they see the data, oh, well, why not this? Why not that? But you first, as you pointed out, you have to get them off that hamster wheel of saying, I'm just looking in the rearview mirror. I'm only looking at what I had in the last 24 hours of the last period, because the past is the past. We're not doing much by just spending our time there.
Yeah, it feels crippling. You can't I look at it like you can't really strategize going forward. You're kind of just reacting when you're looking in the rearview mirror, and that it doesn't feel good either. It feels uncomfortable to be like living in such a, what happened in the past. Data is scary, terrifying. You feel like this is for rocket scientists. This isn't for me. I'm leading people, I'm guiding people, helping them do their jobs better. Well, where does data come into this equation? And it has its place. It's not, data shouldn't conquer either. I don't think you run an organization 100% purely whatever the number says. I think that feels a little like a robot to me, but it's missing a lot of flavor and context, and there's things about that. It's a separate thing altogether. But at the end of the day, optimization's there to grow the business, but you can only grow you can only really improve upon a process. So you have to have something to get going. And so looking in the rearview mirror isn't really a process. It's just like, this is what we've always done. It can be fairly unstructured, fairly informal, and it doesn't really always lend itself well to applying database solutions to anyway. So sometimes an informal, undatabased, historical, looking in the rearview mirror company may hire a data person, data things come in. It's like, this doesn't make any sense. This isn't going to help us. They want us to do this and that. Why? And the reason is like, you really have to approach it. You can't just take a step to the end. You have to take steps up the curve in a methodical way and get where you're at all the time. It's a responsibility of everyone to understand what's happening all the way through an organization, I believe.
Yeah, but you've laid out very well what kind of benefits the whole organization gets if they are receptive or at least willing to take a couple of steps along that road. Kevin, if people want to find out more about you and what you do and what you like to talk about, and maybe even some of your side passions and areas like what your views on the latest Batman movie are, where can they go?
Yeah, I'm a huge Batman fan, if that wasn't clear by Glenn. I can be found, I think the best way to find me is on LinkedIn. My name and last name, you can look me up. Also, just like Glenn, I have a podcast called Close the Loop Podcast. It's about attribution. So that's kind of my niche and the things I love to talk about. Besides that, I speak at some events. You can reach out to me. I have lots of kids and live in Southern California if you ever want to connect. So
that's fantastic. And I can't thank you enough for doing this, Kevin. And listener, I hope that you've gotten some benefit out of this. And if you can think of someone who needs to see what's possible with their optimization and how they can move forward with it, please share this episode with them. And I hope that Kevin has helped giving you something that can make your funnel even better.
Thanks for listening. Follow the show on Twitter @Funnel Reboot. If you like what you have heard today, please consider leaving a review wherever you get your podcasts.